Hi everyone, my name is Bart Smithla and we are starting our bi-weekly community call for K8s Infra. I would like to remind all of you about our code of conduct, which we can summarize as be excellent to each other. And at the beginning, I would like to ask actually two people to help, one for making notes and the second one to be our action items manager. Is there anyone who would like to help us with that?
Good morning.
I think, sorry, Nikita, could you repeat?
I would have loved to help, but I need to change.
I don't know, but I understood this with voice. Tim, can for a second?
I'm going to be doing a bunch of talking today, so I don't know that I can take notes.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry, I was having some audio problems, but I heard my name, but I couldn't hear what the question was.
The question actually was to me for a second because the voice is.
I see. There's this new interesting failure mode I'm seeing with Zoom where I'm getting everybody's voice but resampled. So everybody's voice comes out like this. So Bart, you sounded like the Terminator.
Okay, good to know. Okay, so actually let's start with our, no, maybe if there is anybody new who would like to introduce him or herself or themselves.
I'm some kind new, but I have already introduced myself before a couple of months. I have some rest by joining these kind of meetings, but I'm planning to continue joining the meetings as well and help the team. I'm Milton, by the way. I'm coming from the IKEA and DevOps team.
Great, it's great to see you.
From IKEA, you say?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
It's good to see you here. And let's jump to our recurring topics. We actually did a billing review the last time, so we are skipping this right now. And let's jump into the action items review. The first two action items, the first one actually I didn't do a lot. I was focusing mostly about moving the projects to our new infrastructure where we have actually a lot of successes.
So I just wanted to update on per namespace billing though. I think one of the requests we had around billing was to see if we could get it owned by a Kubernetes.io user account instead of a Google.com user account. The reading I was doing says that you can't transfer data studio reports between domains like that. It's going to have to be created from scratch, unfortunately. And the other snag that I hit was I tried doing what you did, Bart, which was copy the existing Data Studio report and trying to monkey with it. Whatever the data sources are that it uses are not accessible to me either under my Google.com account, which gives me pause. I'm kind of wondering if those are Google.com internal data sources rather than the one that we're like scraping via BigQuery. So I feel like it would be helpful if you could poke Justin to follow up on that.
My problem is that I tried multiple times to poke him on GitHub, on Slack privately, and no response at all. So I don't know if he is ignoring me or he just don't have time to do anything.
Tim, do you think maybe you could?
I'm happy to poke him. What is the specific AI, like what the hell are you doing, or turn over this, like can we just clone his report and reverse engineer it?
So that's the case.
We are unable to clone the report right now because the report is made up of two things. It's made up of like Data Studio charts and data sources, and neither of us have access to the data sources.
Got it. Sorry, I missed that point. Yeah, I'll ping him to just respond.
Okay.
Great. So the OctoDNS working without service account key. This is I started the process. I created the list of the steps which I started doing in the one of the issues. The first one is because we will have to store our image of OctoDNS. And I created a pull request with the preparation for that. But my question is, I will send actually the number of the PR. It is PR number 805. And I would like to ask if everybody is okay for this repository to be called the Infra Tools. And that is actually, I think, the only my question. And if everybody is okay with that, I would love to see somebody approval of that pull request.
Sorry, what?
Sorry, could you repeat?
Are we talking about OctoDNS? You need a repo for OctoDNS?
Yeah, so because we are using the Docker image, which we are building in using the make build file, and then we will use this image into the pro job. So it would be good to store this image under our managed by us registry. So I thought that we can create the registry called Infra Tools with at this point the only image which we would manage and promote would be the OctoDNS.
I have no strong opinion.
Anybody?
Sorry, I'm jumping between windows. That seems fine. I don't love the name, but I don't have anything better. So in fact, I already LGTM'd it. I was just looking to see what happened to my LGTM. And I pinged Justin, so he'll get back in touch with you.
With your LGTM, I pushed some change because there was like some need which I improved. Okay, so let's say that if there will be any, can we agree on that name at this point? Anybody have some thoughts, opinions for the first time?
Go for it. I like Tim feel like there's something I don't like about it, but I can't think of why, so just go for it. We can always rename later if we...
Great. The next item is the PervDash namespace access issues, and the team, can you give update for that?
Those are resolved.
Yeah.
The problem was a misconfiguration. Basically, at some point, we changed the default for groups from members can view members to only managers can view members. And that broke the security groups mechanism, which was documented, but not very boldly so. And so it took some extra eyeballs explaining it to the rubber duck in order to figure out what was going on. Once we fixed that, that problem is resolved.
That's great. And forward to the next point is we actually completely moved the PervDash at the beginning of the last week to our AAA cluster, and documentation is updated. Everything is being run in our cluster. So this is small success.
Excellent. Celebrate. Woohoo!
Actually, the next 2 points also are successes because the publishing bot is also running in AAA cluster without problems so far. I think we decided that today, if there won't be any problems, we will be able to delete the development 2 cluster.
Nikita, are you there? Are you okay with me to go ahead and do it? I've already queued it up. I can share my screen while we delete it.
Do it.
All right. Share screen. Oh, host disabled attendee screen sharing.
I didn't change anything.
All right. You know what? It's not that exciting of a screen. I'll just go ahead and do it. Where is it? Development 2. Oh, it's warning. Node version outdated. Anyway. All right. Goodbye, development 2.
Fix the glitch.
Deleting cluster.
Great. The next topic also Slack tools, which from today are working in our like a proper domains. So they are also working on AAA cluster. We moved them today with James Muners, and so far so good. I suggest that we will leave the old cluster, old tools for the next like a week or two to see if there won't be any problems. But we can. I feel like we can delete it soon too. The only thing is, which I think we are missing, is I would like to also use the container image promoter and use our managed by us images. So there needs to be still done work about preparing the.
Sounds great. You should also make sure you do that for the K8s Tim Palace image.
Which image?
So the tool that's responsible for taking configuration in the community repo and then making it happen in Slack, like creating channels and figuring out who's a member and stuff like that, is called Tim Palace. It also comes from the repo called Slack Infra, but it's not like deployed as a service. It's run as a crowd job.
Okay.
But so the image for that is currently hosted in some google.com project. It would be great to have it hosted in the same place as all those other images.
Okay, I know what you are talking about. Okay, I will remember those. Also, question about the same thing. I prepared the pull request with the registry for the Slack tools. It's 802. If everybody is okay with the name Slack tools.
Why not Slack Infra?
Because we have like a K8s Infra staging Slack Infra. I didn't want to duplicate it, but I'm okay with changing it to Slack Infra.
So K8s Infra staging Slack Infra, isn't that where we're already publishing those images then? Like,
we are not publishing these images, at least not via container image promoter. So they are not deployed in our registries.
Then why does that project already exist?
Which project do you mean?
Sorry, I thought, okay, so for consistency, I think it would be helpful if the repo, if the registry into which we promote images is named after the sub-project that's the home of those images, right? So in this case, sub-project is Slack Infra. So I would assume they have a K8s staging Slack Infra project and associated buckets in GCR repos and stuff like that. Like you're proposing to have a K8s Infra staging or K8s staging Slack tools, which seems different.
Okay, I'm okay. Let's. I actually not sure right now about it. But if I'm okay with that, so I will change it to Slack Infra.
I think that's the established convention anyway. I don't think there's any divergence from that, but if there is, we probably should quash it. There's value in being able to thread those pieces together by their name.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, and the next topic, Slack Infra secrets. Aaron.
That's done. You couldn't have deployed your Slack Infra stuff without the secrets being there.
Yeah, okay, but you suggested the, maybe we can discuss also the topic, the suggestion to not use the...
Oh, using something other than GitCrypt? Let's get to that later.
Okay, no worries. So let's switch to prod GCS bucket for kind, continuing pattern used for CNI. Tim, can you give us an update?
That also happened.
All finished.
Yeah.
That's great. About the monitoring, because I feel like we have a lot of projects already working on AAA, and it would be good to start with the monitoring, but I had a problem. I tried to understand how the stack driver works and if we can do some dashboards and charts, etc. But I'm not sure if I don't have permissions, which I should have, because we've added the permissions, I feel like 2 or 4 weeks ago, but I still see the error failed to load and without any explanation, so I can't play with it at all.
Feel free to open up an issue about that and then assign it to you and me, and I think we can tackle it offline.
Okay, so that would be a great place to create an action item.
Yeah.
For me to do it.
For what it's worth, what I tried to do for all of the action items, since I was the action item guy last time, was I turned them all into issues inside of K8s IO, and then I assigned them to the people whose AI it was.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so there are the updates. Let's switch to the open discussion. My first topic is the consensus over the way of adding permission for service accounts, because so far we were doing it via directly assigning the gcloud commands in our scripts, and Aaron created a pull request for where he's just added the secret service account to the Google group, which I think I like. But I'm not sure what do you think, which approach we should?
So in this case, it seemed like there was a pretty clear mapping between a Kubernetes IO group that was designed just for people who had audit permission. And I wanted a service account to be able to do the exact same thing that those people could do. So I felt like it was more appropriate to add it to that Google group. I think there are other times when we want service accounts to be able to do things that are not so cleanly described by humans. So for example, when we set up the service account that Kubernetes cluster nodes should be able to act as, right? We probably want to directly add IAM permissions there. So it was totally a style thing. I don't necessarily know if there has to be one way or the other. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. We should figure out what we think are guiding principles for this. So I think there's a couple things to think about. One, we didn't really use GCP roles very well. I didn't. I'll take the responsibility. And so I have a lot of places where I just open bind various service account names or group names to individual pre-established roles. What we probably should do is for each of the groups that we define in Google Groups, define a role and bind the group to the role and then add permissions to the role. So we don't have to do it multiple times across multiple, we can even do it at the org level, so we don't have to do it multiple times in multiple projects. But that's a bigger change that needs some careful thinking if we're gonna make that change. I love the idea of adding service accounts to groups. I think, I'm trying to think through if there's any real downsides to it, especially if we're adding like a remote service account to it, because you don't need to have special IAM permissions in order to do that, right? Any one of this group can do that by, it's essentially delegating permission to link to established permissions as opposed to being able to set IAM bindings on GCP, right? So I kind of like that delegation, but I'd like for us to figure out like when do we do the one, when do we do the other, and when do we issue service account credentials, right? Like that's the obvious place where we need a service account.
My is because I ask mostly because I want to move forward the DNS updates automation. I think I have all planned, and I'm not sure if I should, because we will create the service account for that purpose to give the pro the information which service account should use. So I think I will start trying to just add the service account to the group for DNS admins. Are you okay?
Yeah, so hand waving, if I could do it all over, what I probably would have done would be define a DNS admin role. That's actually, there's a predefined role for that, but let's assume that we wanted to add one extra permission or the auditor role, right? Define an auditor role with all the permissions we want, then bind the group to the role, and then anybody we want to give that role, we just add to the group. I think that's a nice chain of control. The only caveat that I can think of here is I believe the groups feature is still technically beta. So I don't know if we worry about that. I'm not particularly, like I don't expect that we're going to abandon it or anything. But otherwise it seems okay to me.
I'm also okay with the beta, and if there will be a problem, we will need to rethink it and we can iterate. At least that's my opinion.
And I can confirm that using the group in that way so that PervJob can use that service account and do what it needs to, it works. Because I was doing this to play around with something that, giving something permission to audit all of the GCP org, and that worked.
Oh, and actually, I just lied. It's not the GKE integration is beta. The GCP integration is GA. So no worries.
Sounds good to me. Okay, so I know what to do with that. The next topic is the Pro migration plan.
I will need to be able to share my screen, and I need to take advantage of Tim's time here.
You should be able to do it because you are the co-host.
All right, let's try. Cool. Okay. So I spent some time over the past couple of days hacking together my own personal Prow instance at prow.bashfire.dev. And then I stood up a build cluster inside of Kubernetes public. And I connected this instance of Prow to that build cluster. And I got as far as confirming that I could run like these jobs, which Zoom's UI is hiding. But you know, running end-to-end tests for Kubernetes, running end-to-end tests for Node. And I think if I refresh here, this was the auditing thing I was talking about earlier. I've got a job that is at least capable of running our audit script. It doesn't yet. What I want it to do is to be able to open up a PR with our audit results. Okay, so I feel like that's given me enough info about what's involved in migrating Prow build clusters over. I've put together this document. It's linked from the issue that's Prow migration plan, where I propose that we focus first and foremost on standing up build clusters and E2E project pools in the CNCF org, because this is where we expect the bulk of the cost to come from. I think we can set up a trusted cluster in the CNCF org to be able to run trusted jobs like pushing images and stuff. And this will also empower members of the community to be able to troubleshoot why certain projects or jobs are unable to run. This is in direct contrast to the situation last week, I think, where SigNode couldn't figure out why a Google.com project was breaking all Node E2E tests. So given the time that I have, I'm going to assume some familiarity or something, but please feel free to ask me questions. Basically, I feel like proposing, or first off, the way that Prow does things today, we have one 160 node build cluster that we schedule pretty much every single job to. And then we schedule trusted jobs to the cluster that runs Prow itself. What I'm proposing instead is that we have two build clusters that live over in the Kubernetes public project. One for all the untrusted jobs, one for trusted. Untrusted jobs, I feel like that cluster doesn't necessarily have to start at 160 nodes, but we need to anticipate it could grow to that size. And
160 nodes times how big?
N1 high.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot of cores. Jeez.
Yeah, it's mostly because the Go builds and the Bazel builds kind of eat memory like candy for Kubernetes specifically. Let's see here. But I'm trying to think of this from a billing perspective. Right now, I don't know how to be able to say that a given job costs us this much money per month. And it'd be nice to be able to get near that. So right now, the cost of a job, as I understand it, would be the cost of running the pod on the build cluster, plus the cost of whatever that job happens to create to exercise. So that's what I call the E2E project, where the job is going to create a Kubernetes, it's going to launch a couple VMs, it's going to install Kubernetes on it, it might create some GCS buckets to store artifacts, things like that. And so all that together equals the cost of one run of a job. I don't know of a way to tie that together right now today, because we use a thing called Boscos that ends up managing a pool of projects, and jobs can run on any given project at any given time. So one thing so that's what is done today, and I'm proposing we basically start with that today. But as we start to feel like costs are kind of unexplained or rising, one thing we could do instead is to start to create different pools of projects that are intended for different SIGs. So we could say like SIG scalability, you use these projects over here. SIG node, you run all your end-to-end tests over here. SIG release, you run all your tests over here. That gets a little tricky for some jobs like the Kubernetes E2E job, which kind of like every SIG is responsible for, but also no SIG for.
Do we care more about billing back to SIGs, or do we care more about billing back to jobs?
I'm using SIG as a loose proxy where we could say that a job needs to be linked to SIG.
Well, like, so it seems like each SIG will own multiple jobs, right?
Right.
So is it interesting, like projects cost nothing, right? So does it make sense to just go large on projects and get the granularity that we want? And then we can glue back together the total charges from a bunch of jobs and say, hey, SIG scalability cost X dollars, but you know, job A costs this and job B costs that.
Just in raised hand, just want to.
I feel like that causes a lot more administrivia in job creation and job management, but that is theoretically possible. I'll have to think about that a bit more. It also kind of comes down to how much we care about billing in the first place right now. So like I said,
I think we will care, right? So already I pulled up the billing report today just to take a look for the month to date, and the month to date it's in the thousands, right? So it's not egregious, but it is several thousand.
The majority
and once we add this, sorry?
I said the majority of that comes from the domain flip over, but I agree.
Yes, sure. And once we flip it back, it'll be even more, right?
Right.
So I expect that 160 times 8 cores is also going to drown out the smaller stuff.
Right.
And so, you know, I think we will care eventually, and we will want to perhaps use this as the financial motivator for fixing test flakes, right?
Right. And that to me goes back to, I feel like it's up to SIGs to fix test flakes, and it's up to SIGs to fix their tests, which is why I was thinking of bringing the costs back to SIGs rather than on a per job basis. Or we start with SIGs, and then if we find we need to, we could go to a per job basis later.
I leave that to you to decide on whether it's important or worth the engineering effort to divvy it up further. I'm putting it out there as an option.
Okay. So
I just want to make.
You're at your 10 minutes, Tim. Sorry. But
That's all right. If you have more, I can give you a couple more minutes before I bounce.
I mean, I want to get consensus that, so this test cluster that I stood up today was just like a couple of nodes, and they were N1 high mem 2s. Do you feel like, and I've proven that it works, do you think I should move on to the next step of creating like a trusted cluster and an untrusted cluster, and I should size them more like the actual stuff? I'm not necessarily saying use 160 nodes right away, but I am saying use those instance types and start to scale it as we move more jobs over.
Do you think it makes more sense to do trusted and untrusted in parallel, or to focus on one, go deep, and then focus on the other?
I kind of feel like doing it.
Okay, I trust your judgment on this. I have no context by which to say you're wrong. So that's fine. What about auto scaling? Is it just too slow for the use case here?
I am okay with us trying out and seeing what happens. I'd like to believe there are some other proud teams that are auto scaling. So we can find out. Also
Okay.
just straight up copied the AAA cluster configuration, which means that the build clusters were regional clusters. I don't know that they have to be. I don't know if we care, but I figured I'd just copy paste for ease of.
Well, they don't do a lot of pod to pod communication, right?
No, none.
So that's not going to be, there's no charge there. There's no extra charge for being a regional cluster. The advantage of being regional is we can tolerate the master upgrades without losing the control plane. So
Okay.
I don't see why we wouldn't make them regional.
Okay, there's another question I had for you while you're here. Right now, all of the service accounts that I created for these clusters to act as or use, I created under the Kubernetes public project. I don't know that they have to be there. I just created them there because that's where I was also creating the build cluster. And I created the build cluster in the Kubernetes project because I felt like that's where you would want everything that's actually being used or consumed to be. But I could just as easily create these build clusters and these service accounts in their own GCP projects to give them a sort of logical separation from the Kubernetes public project. Do you have any opinion there?
I don't have a strong opinion. We laid out the directory structure so you can do either one, right? And it should be trivial to do. They're all going to come back to the same billing account. I don't know. Do we have further permissions that we'll want to grant to people who are dealing with PROW that we wouldn't want to grant to other clusters, or do we think administration will be easier in different projects? We're not doing any cross-cluster communication.
For today, for reasons, basically because workload identity only has one identity namespace per project, it would be easier if I could use a project per build cluster. And just for like logical separation of concerns, I don't feel compelled that they have to exist in the Kubernetes public project. I can't think that there are any, the only difference I would see for reasons to access PROW would be giving community members the ability to SSH into a given project that PROW is using to stand up VMs or instances, or possibly to access the PROW build cluster to figure out what it's doing. So there could be some piecemeal like adding and removing of people that I would want to do by groups. I don't know how that would commingle with the Kubernetes public project. So I don't have a
It sounds like there's no reason to force it to be the same project, and there might be good reasons to put it in separate projects. So why not go for it?
Yeah, okay.
Other than like a multitude of projects, which again are free, I don't really see a problem.
Okay. I think that's everything I wanted your sign off on before moving further. Did you have any questions you wanted to ask before you have to go?
Nope, thanks for taking charge.
Okay, thanks.
Justin, I saw you raised a hand and didn't have.
Yeah, it was just a minor thing. Like we can also try to encourage the jobs that create GCP resources and AWS resources to start labeling them. And that should then flow through into billing reports. And we could, in theory, have almost arbitrary granularity on what happens. I don't know what happens with sort of the cardinality, like whether we can actually get onto the individual job run level, but we can certainly get onto the job level, I'd imagine.
Okay, because I was wondering, yeah, if not the jobs themselves, I'm wondering if we can have Boscos do that when it leases out a project to a given job, it could like label the project with the name of the job that it's leasing out to, and then we could look for everything that's got a given job's label or something.
Does it flow down? That would be cool.
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, it's worth thinking about. But yeah, I think like it's probably not the priority, I would guess, right? The Boscos approach where we just like have separate GCP projects does feel much easier.
Yeah, it's significantly easier from an admin perspective. I was hoping or assuming that then from a billing perspective, you could just say, yeah, it's probably tougher to roll up. I don't know.
I mean, we just name. I'd suggest we just name the projects with a prefix or something like big scalability, BOSCOS 1, BOSCOS 2.
Yes. So that was sort of the naming is hard portion of this next step.
Okay.
I was thinking of naming the ProwBuild cluster ProwBuild. I was thinking of naming the trusted ProwBuild cluster ProwBuild-trusted. And then I was thinking of naming all the projects that would be used by jobs. For now, before I figure out how to assign them to SIGs, I was thinking just like K8s Infra E2E, and then BOSCOS number for everything that we expect BOSCOS to manage. In the future, if we wanted to try tying things to like SIG specific projects, we could just name the projects like K8s-SIG E2E, whatever. And then we could, from a billing perspective, look for all projects that have SIG scalability in their name. Something like that.
Those all sound like great ideas.
Okay.
I think technically, I don't think BOSCOS has the ability to split off, like has a partition pool. So I guess we just create different pools. They'd be different resources.
We would create different pools, and then we'd have to change the jobs to ask for the like SIG scalability pool or the SIG node pool or whatever.
That feels much easier than asking people to label all their resources, to be honest. Like, I know cops can do it, but I don't know if everyone else will.
Right. That I felt was like the next a good level of additional granularity. And then if we feel compelled to go further than that, we can talk about what we need to label and how to look at individual job runs. I could keep going about the rest of the Prow stuff. Essentially, once the build clusters are created, we then hook them up to prow.k8s.io. We need to ask for that Prow cluster to have cluster admin privileges to these build clusters. We give them a kubeconfig, and that works. And then I would set up service accounts that these clusters act as that will have project editor access to all of the E2E projects in the CNCF Work, and that will have write access to the Kubernetes Jenkins bucket, which would leave us in the situation where prow.k8s.io and all of the CI artifacts are still within google.com, but all of the job execution and all of the resources being exercised are over in CNCF and being billed for over here. This would theoretically empower us to, like I said, do the three things above. We hopefully start spending some real money. We empower people to start really SSHing into projects if things break, and all of the trusted cluster stuff that we need to bug K8s Infra on call for right now, like pushing images and stuff, we can do that over in our own trusted cluster as we develop like our own pool of trusted people who make sure that like you're really checking in a sane Google Cloud build job and stuff like that. And then there's a lot more to go on from there about like how we move over all the CI artifacts and how we move over prow.k8s.io itself. I feel like that's probably enough for today though, if you all agree.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And actually, I like that we started, and I'm very happy that you did the research. That's great to see.
Okay. The place that I want to get to is, so I hacked this together myself. I want to get to the point where I'm not the person moving the jobs over. So my intention is to try and get build clusters set up and hooked up, but then I have other things that I need to focus on. So I feel like the best way to make that happen is to make sure I leave folks with a dev test cycle that they can trust for migrating jobs over. And hopefully we can talk about that in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it, and I'm also happy to learn it. So if I will understand the process, how to move the jobs, then I will definitely be able to help others if there will be need.
Okay. Anything else about Proud? Also, feel free to drop comments on that doc or whatever if you have suggestions. Oh, right. I did also want to say that, like, I genuinely tried to do Terraform for this stuff instead of adding more Bash, and I am not comfortable enough with Terraform just yet. I got as far as using Terraform to provision some of the service accounts and do some of the workload identity binding. But when it came to provisioning a whole bunch of projects that look similar, I'm sure this is a great job for Terraform modules, but I didn't quite have the time to learn how to use those.
Same here. I also stopped at the modules at this point.
Okay, so the next thing I wanted to try and do was to walk us through a project board for K8s Infra, because I do enjoy walking through our meeting agenda, but then it's difficult for me to figure out, like, what's actually happening over the next 2 weeks in between meetings. So that's part of why I tried to start by turning action items into GitHub issues that live in K8s.io. And then I can throw all that stuff into the in progress column on our board. And then similarly, things I think we're planning on doing, we can throw that into the backlog column on our board. So go ahead, Bart.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. So let's do it.
So I just wanted to try and run through some of the stuff in the in progress column and see if any of it can be closed out or what needs to be done. So I think we talked about the namespace billing info. Justin, since you are here, Bart has been trying to make a copy of your billing report and see if he can, like, twiddle some bits to figure out how to do per namespace billing. But he finds that he is unable to copy the data sources that are used by that report. And I found that I, as a Google.com person, also couldn't copy that data source. I wanted to confirm we're using the right data source, and what you would suggest for moving this Data Studio report to a user in the Kubernetes IO domain instead of Google.com.
I can if you create me a user or something like that, I will get the report into the, what is it, the Google groups, CNCF Google groups or Kubernetes Google groups.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do that, figure out how that works. As far as I know, we're just using what I thought was the standard BigQuery export from the CNCF projects. The numbers match, so I presume that's right. I'm not doing anything fancy there. And I don't know why permissions don't work. I don't know whether it's a problem with copying the Data Studio source or whether it's a problem with, which actually it could be, because there's something weird about it being like in Drive. So that's not impossible that is the case. But I will happily, if you give me an account in the correct location, whatever that location is, I will, yeah.
Yeah. So I made the account. I'll get the credentials for you later.
Thank you.
Does that sound good, Bart, or is there anything else we needed to discuss on this issue?
Sounds good.
Okay. Next one is removing the Bart test namespace in AAA and the related workload identity grids.
So this will happen when I will finish with the DNS update. But actually, it's not being used, as I decided to use Pro instead of the Git sync approach as we were discussing before. But let's leave it as it is right now, and when.
Okay. I don't know the issue offhand to link to, but I'll figure it out. I don't think we have the right people here to talk about allowing sub-projects to push to root. I feel like Stephen Augustus and Linus and Tim Hawken need to be here.
I don't have any knowledge about it.
So I'm going to put that in the block. This basically, there's some core Kubernetes release artifacts that he wants to continue to push into the root of the artifacts namespace instead of a prefix. Yeah, reasons. Okay, migrate or retire node PervDash.
So no response yet, but I didn't send the message to the SIG-Node Google group. And I think we should send a message that we want to retire it in a week or two.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I know Dim said something about 2 weeks earlier. I think we shouldn't start that 2-week clock until you've sent out the message. So if you can just link to the message in this issue, then we'll know when we can start counting down.
Definitely agree.
Okay, migrating Slack infra services to cluster. I think you basically updated us on all that. Yeah, okay. So that's still ongoing.
So the only thing which are actually not related to moving itself, but the images which we discussed at the beginning. So the hosting images in our infra.
Do you think we can close this?
I think we can close this, and because this is not exactly the same issue.
Okay. Next up, develop a cloud migration plan. I think I just did that. I will comment the decisions we made, and then I will start opening up issues to describe the work to be done there. DNS Update Automation.
We agreed today about the name of the tools, so I will proceed with that. There is plan, not much work yet done.
Okay.
But we agreed about everything, which I wasn't sure, so I will do it this week, I think.
Okay. Depending on how quickly I get moving with setting up build clusters, maybe we could get this running on the build cluster over here. Okay. This I just talked about. I created a Kubernetes IO user, which I will hand the credentials to Justin for. Dim's is not here, but we had something about him creating a script to generate keys for conformance.
I took this issue after discussion with Dim, so I will prepare the scripts itself.
Okay.
But I didn't have time to do it yet.
Okay. Static IP management. Tim said he wanted to talk about it at the meeting today, and then we didn't. So I'm going to move this to block for now, if that's okay.
Yep.
All right. Cool. So like I said, I created issues to talk about turning down clusters when we're done with them. So turning down, this is a google.com internal cluster, but it's helpful for those of us who are tracking what we're migrating. Once we figure out what to do with node PervDash, we can turn this down. Storage analysis for billing. I actually have no idea what this is.
I also don't remember.
Okay, I think this is maybe, Justin, maybe you have something.
Yeah, I think this is just about further drill down on the storage costs. I don't know, my screen is really small, but like currently we just have a per project spend on GCS, and we can't say like which subdirectory, or we don't know like which files are getting pulled, that sort of thing, is my understanding.
Right. So this is the sort of thing that will become more important when we finish the vanity domain flip, and then we want to start understanding like which images are getting pulled the most and costing us the most money, sort of deal.
Yes, except I don't think this is GCR. I think this is GCS.
Okay.
Like I don't think we'll get these stats from or the path to get the GCR stats will be different, I think, from the path to get the GCS stats. I agree with you that the meta point, which is it should be, we should prioritize based on like where we're spending. So like if it's $100, it's not worth anyone's time to break that down. If it's $1,000, then we start thinking about it, I think.
Okay. I'm gonna punt on this one. Policy around granularity and grouping for it's just, yeah, where should people store their images? Okay, set up a job to scrape and audit IAM policies. Like I said, I have something that does that. The job looks kind of like this. It runs in a service account that's bound to the auditor permissions. It just runs the audit script, it divs everything, it commits it. Now what I need to do is actually set it up to create a PR the existing code that's out there to do that isn't quite flexible enough for this. I could totally use someone's help if they want to try refactoring this tool that I referenced, the PR creator. Otherwise, if given enough time, eventually I may try refactoring it myself. But I basically want something that you can see the way to push to a private GitHub repo is I either need to give an SSH key to that private repo, which I don't know about that, or I need to provide an OAuth token, and I could use a URI of this form. And so I'd love to have a tool that instead, like I mounted an OAuth token and it just used that to push, because it will need that same OAuth token to be able to create or automatically update the PR.
I can help with the refactoring, I think. My question is it automatically or is it periodically called job or?
All I have it set up right now is as a post submit, but I do think eventually we would want it to be periodically.
Because the post submit won't work.
Yeah, I just had it as a post submit just for testing purposes right now, but I agree, like to do the real actual thing, it would be a periodic, and like it wouldn't bother creating a PR or updating a PR if one is already open if there have been no changes. Turning down the Kubernetes tools cluster. This is once all the Slack infra stuff has been migrated over. So
suggested let's give 2 more weeks to check if everything works with the new infra, and I would be happy to let it go after 2 weeks.
Do we want to consider maybe turning down the apps on this cluster at some point?
Yeah, the case is that I would like to have them still running if we would have to quickly, switch DNSs to the old cluster yet. But let's say in a week or 2, I'm happy to just turn them down. I'm kind of confident that everything will work as it's working right now, but you never know.
Okay. Given the amount of time that we have left, I want to kind of jump down to the bottom here and talk about using Secret Manager instead of GitCrypt. So Google Cloud has this wonderful thing called Secret Manager, which lets me store my secrets in the cloud so that other people can access them, and I can define who accesses them by the same IAM policies that we've been using to define access to everything else. I feel like this is a much better approach for us to use when it comes to storing and sharing secrets with each other, as opposed to the approach we use right now, which is GitCrypt. And the reason is because GitCrypt is like one repo fits everybody. So like any secret that we have stored in the repo, anybody who has their keys added to GitCrypt can view, and maybe that's not quite appropriate. So I feel like I'd like to suggest we abandon GitCrypt and instead move to using Secret Manager.
Sounds good to me. I will ping Dims what he thinks about it. I think we can also ask Tim Hawking. I think I'm fine with it.
All right. I was thinking as like a first proof of concept, I might, I'll ping Tim to see if it's okay if I enable the API on the Kubernetes public, or on the G Suite project, on the Kubernetes public project. And then I want to try undoing our GitCrypt integration for the groups reconciliation, so that anybody who's in the groups reconciliation group has access to the secret. So it'll be effectively the same thing, but one less GitCrypt thing.
So anybody has some comments and opinions?
Just as an interesting side effect, I think that with the G-Cloud secrets, we might be able to, if, for example, a service account isn't enough for a job or something, the G-Cloud secrets could be mounted into a pod in GKE. I think there's an integration there. So that would be an interesting workaround if something isn't working with identities or something like that, which was, for example, something that we might run into with OctoDNS, but we don't know if it actually likes the identity versus a token.
Sounds good to me.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. I couldn't find anything in the one blog post I read that talked specifically about GKE integration, but I would be shocked if there isn't GKE integration for this.
Thank you, Michael, for telling us about it.
I'm going to stop my share there and see if there's anything else we wanted to get to. I'll hand it back over to you, Bart.
No worries. So anybody has some questions, topics in next 2 minutes, we can start.
There's one that came up again, and Justin was introducing that PR. It's about binary artifacts, and another project that might need them. So the actual pull request is on a staging repo, but the usage it seems is on binary artifacts. And I think they might be user-facing. So we should probably figure out if anything that is user-facing on the binary side, we want to have in staging or push similar to kind to be production-like and therefore have longer retention. And we create a manual production GCS bucket for now until we have binary promotion.
Which project are you talking about?
It's... close the window.
Never mind, we have just 1 minute, but please create an issue and...
Yeah, there's one. So it's pull request 811, and it's a staging project for etcd ADM, and they want to pre-build their binaries for easier user access. So it's something that is not currently completely necessary, but I feel like using staging images would be, or staging, the staging bucket would be kind of a weird decision.
Yeah, if I can just say so I actually opened the etcd ADM pull request, and I'm also hoping to work on getting the promoter work going, the binary artifact promoter, now that we have the image promoter going. I was sort of taking a break from it until we got the image promoter going, and now we have the image promoter going. At least partially, I'm going to try to get the binary promoter going as well.
I would also throw out there, I think there are few enough of these, maybe we would be willing to, I think Ben just went through this for kind, right? So maybe Ben could show you how to do the same thing for etcd ADM.
Doing that yet. We're pushing nightlies to staging.
Oh, I thought you were pushing directly to prod bucket.
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay, guys, let's move the further discussion to our Slack channel. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here. There was a lot of interesting discussions, and have a great day, everybody.
Thanks all.
So, see ya.
Thank you. Bye.